There are 1,000 stories in the Envisioner's future. This is just one of them.
Well, hello, how the devil are you? It is another week and another Rise with the Humans live stream. What a fantastic time it is to be alive. It's even pointless asking about how you are or how your experience is, because I'm not sure anybody truly knows. But with that in mind, we've got a great show for you today. We're going to be talking about our relationship with technology. We are, check me out, dialing into the future of work. See, I still love that. And if you haven't already, don't forget, click on the like button if you like the video, give us a subscribe if you haven't, and as they say in YouTube parlance, ring the bell and you'll be notified whenever we go on air, should you so choose to be. So what's it all about this week? It's all about digital well-being. It's all about our relationship with technology. And the question I asked on the trailer today, and it would be great, actually, let me know in the comments below, since the beginning of lockdown, do you think that you have spent more time, about the same, or less time in front of a screen? Really interested to get your sense for that. For me personally, I'm quite embarrassed to say that I actually think I've spent the same amount of time in front of a screen in lockdown as I did before then. So I'm not sure if that's a great or bad thing, but there you go. So we're going to be talking about that a bit more. We've got a special guest coming up for you to talk specifically about that. Before we do, you know, there's always a little bit of housekeeping. We're actually going to go straight to thank our sponsors, Treble 3, amazing guys in the world of digital. There are none better than the likes of Treble 3. They will look after all of your digital requirements, whether it is print, whether it's vinyl, whether it's websites, the whole ball of wax. They do a great job, been doing a great job with Envisioners for over 10 years. They are behind pretty much everything that you can see on stage there, the design, the banner stands, even the tablecloth. And I do love the fact that we have our very own Rise of the Humans tablecloth. You can see dinner time in the Coppin household is never a dull moment. With that in mind, let's go back to our relationship with technology. I want to set the stage for a few statistics, and then we can talk a bit more about what that means to us. So we are looking at ONS statistics that came out this week that said of all working adults in the UK, 49% of working adults are working from home. What a huge number. And that is part of the opportunity that we are all experiencing. And of those 49% of adults, we know that 13%, so we're seeing a 13% increase in productivity. So people are finding that working from home gives them a better, more productive experience. So all good, right? Well, maybe not so much, because in another study, what we hear is that 60% of people surveyed are desperate, gagging, crying out to get back into the office. They want to be back into the office. But interestingly, of the 60% of the same people who were surveyed, 35% of them would actually prefer a different kind of working week. They would prefer a working week where they spend maybe 3 to 4 days working remotely and only 1 day back into the office. So interesting nuance. But the real challenges really come to us when we start to look at the change in our behavior when it comes to our relationship with technology. This is a plot of the global internet traffic from February to around mid-April. And what you can see is essentially a 30% spike from when many countries started to go into lockdown. So if you remember, it was sort of Italy and Spain were first, and then we followed a bit after. So we've got 30% more traffic happening on the internet. And we're also increasingly seeing, this is a US number, right? So, but we're seeing that kids are spending 50 to 60% more of their time in front of a screen as a result of lockdown. And I'm not saying whether that's a good or a bad thing, but clearly it's a different thing to where we were before. And what that really leaves us with is some of the more problematic statistics. This came from a LinkedIn survey that was done on a large survey base, actually, and it was done around mid-April, if I remember correctly. But it said that we are seeing twice the amount of burnout that we would typically see in individuals, or people, basically twice the number of people are registering that they are more anxious about work as a result of working in lockdown. And I think we have to careful there, because I think being anxious about working from home is one thing. Being anxious about working from home in an environment where there is a global pandemic and we're worried about our loved ones, we're worried about our own health, we're also probably worried about our jobs as well. So there's lots of things that we have to unpack if we're to get into that. That kind of sets the stage for where we're at, and it sets the stage for our relationship with technology. And with that, I want to bring in today's fabulous panel. We have, as always, in standard definition, we have Gary Burt. How are you doing, Gary? Great to have you with us.
Hi, Dave.
And we have, in fabulous high definition, we have Laura Willis, who is the co-founder of an organisation called Shine Offline. I met Laura at an event that we were both working at, and I was just blown away by her message. And I've never actually told you this, Laura, but when I met you, you can imagine in my line of work, you come across lots of people who are trying to re-establish people's relationship with technology, and typically that means just they should stop using technology. And when I saw you on the agenda, I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ, please let it not be that. And I'm delighted to say that you blew me away. I mean, absolutely. I sat in the audience, as you know, and the message was just lovely for me to hear, in the sense it was you were trying to help people establish a fabulous base from which they could enjoy what technology brings to them rather than be challenged by it. And you help them understand where the barriers are and all that stuff. So it's a real pleasure for me to have you on the show. So how are you doing, Laura?
Well, I'm very well now. Thanks for that. That's lovely to hear. Yes, I'm good. Thanks, Dave. It's super to be here.
And I guess, let's jump into the conversation. And what I'd love, Laura, is if you could just unpack a little bit about, your journey. Why did you start Shine Offline? The stuff that you were doing pre-pandemic. And then I'd love to, at the sort of the tail end of that, get into what's happening now. What are you seeing now? How has that world, your worldview changed with your clients as a result of the situation that we're in?
Okay, cool. So we launched Shine Offline 5 years ago on the back of a period of very poor mental health that I experienced. I had a pull to my inbox. It was very strong, and I'd had it for a long time. And when I became a mum, the pull was still there, and I was working from home. And I became so overwhelmed that I basically fell apart. And went on a journey to try and work out what was going wrong and to, fix myself. And what I realized quite quickly was that my relationship with my phone was causing most of my problems, because I had no boundaries around work and personal. I carried it everywhere I went. The pull to it was really, really strong. And I simply wasn't in control of my own attention. So I, at the same time, being somebody who studied psychology and was really interested in human behavior, obviously knew and noticed that around the world people were connected a lot of the time, and felt a sense that this wasn't always a positive. And then basically had a light bulb moment on a train. I had got myself to a place where I had two phones, a work phone and a personal phone, to allow me to have some work-life balance. I practiced mindfulness most days to exercise my attention. And I had other little tactics going, and I was on a commuter train and I saw a guy on his iPad watching something while playing solitaire on his phone. And I just had a bit of a light bulb moment and thought, there's a lot of media coverage around this. At the time, Ed Sheeran had come off Twitter, Stephen Fry had come off Twitter. There was a lot of research coming out, but it didn't feel like anybody was really helping people to understand their behavior and make adjustments if they felt they needed to. So that was the aim at Shine Offline. And that's what we do. We go into workplaces and we work with teams of people to get them to understand their digital behavior, both personally and professionally, where the issues might be around balance and control, and what they can do individually and collectively to get that sense of balance back and make sure their technology is really enabling them and enhancing their experience at work and enhancing their personal lives. So as you say, it's not about removing technology, it's about reframing our relationship with it.
Yeah, and it was that bit that you've just said, I think, that really hooks me, was it's about how do you get people to use the technology to enable them and help them understand where it's disabling them, that I think is a key part of this. So, the bit for me in the world that we're in now is, I described it earlier today as this paradox, right? Because the very thing that is enabling us to stay connected to our loved ones, to our work, to our school, it also, at the other end of the spectrum, risks causing us some challenges. And it might be small scale challenges, it might be large scale. And already, on the show, as you know, we've talked a lot about mental health and well-being. So how's that world now for you? And, you know, when you're engaging with your clients or thinking about this in a world where we're now even more reliant on making the technology, has that changed things for you and the team?
Definitely. I knew whenever COVID-19 started and lockdown was rumored that digital well-being and management was going to be so important for people, because I could see a change in my own behavior as somebody who's a bit of a digital minimalist. Don't really look at news. I'm not that curious. I'm not on social media. I don't really look at my phone very much, etc. And I was feeling a really strong pull. And obviously having to work from home, you know, we work with a lot of businesses who have a flexible approach to work. And historically, we find that there is an awful lot of guilt and that people really struggle to put boundaries in place around their digital use so that they know when they're logging on and logging off and they're not on all the time and they're not working 24/7. So we knew that there was going to be problems and that people were going to struggle. I think, you know, there was a sense that if you had some strategies in place pre-COVID, hopefully you'd be able to use those moving forward. And those people who were maybe struggling before the coronavirus were going to struggle even further. And also just, you know, as you say, we need the technology. We need it to move forward. You know, our internet usage must have gone up massively because we were doing Joe Wicks in our house. My daughter was having play dates on Zoom. We were on an awful lot more than normal. So what we're finding with clients is, at the start, back in sort of April, May, people were much more pulled to their news and their social media. There was that desire for reassurance and understanding of what was happening. People seem to be getting a handle on that. Some people are getting a handle on that and realizing it was causing them more stress. The guilt thing about working from home and being digitally present is a problem, which we forecast would be. Email traffic has gone up. Email is a problem for pretty much everybody we've ever worked with. Email traffic is an issue. And obviously when you're not with your colleagues, that email traffic's gone up. And Zoom fatigue, you know, we all know it. I'm very glad to be here tonight. I'm not that fatigued, but people are using the tech to stay in touch and connect professionally, but it's back to back, it's stressful, it's exhausting, etc. So the problems are there, and it's basically just a magnification of what was going on before.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's slightly worse than that, because I think all of the culture, I've been talking a lot about how you need a very different culture of an organization to work well in a world where you're mostly dispersed. And all of the sort of discrepancies in that culture, all of the problems that you can hide when you're physically in the office, they start to creep out and get into the way. So I've seen a lot, and this is anecdotally, but a lot of people who, you know, they're enduring all of the Zoom calls because they feel that they need to. They feel that they need to be seen, because if they're not seen by their management, they're going to be disregarded as valuable employees. And you know, we used to see this in email back in the day. I don't know if, Gary, if you remember some of this, that there would be one of the hallmarks of sort of bad culture would be the organizations where the leaders would send out emails in the evening, and they would literally measure their value of the employees based on the time it took them to respond to an out of hours email. And you know, there's a bit of that, I think, that's going on and making this worse. But you know, the thing for me now is that we are, you know, we're in this, and I know everybody talks about the long term and all that sort of stuff, but seriously, I think even you know, if we manage to get back into the office, as we're being told now by the UK government, it's not going to be all of us back into the office, and some element of remote and flexible working is going to persist. So what are the things, Laura, that you're starting to talk to your clients who are maybe thinking a bit more proactively about this? What are the building blocks that you're working with them on about putting in place to make this the right kind of experience?
The first thing is to start talking about it, because the negative role that digital technology has been playing in people's working lives has become an elephant in the room that people don't talk about. And I know I think you've got a bit of a position that you think email isn't as much of a problem anymore as it used to be. But in the work that we do, we find that out of hours email traffic is as high as ever. And the expectation of response, this unrealistic expectation of being contactable all of the time, it's still a problem. We need to talk about this. We need managers to understand their own behavior. We need them to understand the impact that constantly being on and not being in control of your own attention has on their ability to do their jobs, to manage effectively, on their ability to rest, etc. And then we need them to understand the impact their behavior is having on the people that they're managing. Because if this was an issue whenever we were all in the office and now half of the team are at home, it's still a problem, and we just need to talk. Is digital enhancing our experience as a group? Is it helping us, or are people actually feeling overwhelmed? And empower people to, we're starting to see businesses coming out now who are putting together like wellbeing charters, and within that, their relationship with digital technology is central, and they're asking people to put together their own rule book and communicate it to their colleagues. When are you going to be on? When are you going to be off? Are you going to be available on email all of the time throughout the day? If not, tell people, because it's fine not to be. We've all got jobs. We are not professional emailers, Yeah. So for me, an awful lot of it is about just let's have some conversations and work out, when we go in at senior management level, we find that senior leaders, whenever you survey them anonymously, are actually more stressed out by their tech than the staff.
Yeah.
So we all need to talk about this, and let's not be scared. Every business, banks, law firms, government, they're all experiencing overwhelm and overload, digital overwhelm and overload. So let's just get this subject on the agenda and work out what can we do as a unit to make this work for us. You know?
No, totally. And look, there's a number of things I want to pick up there, and then Gary, I'll hand over to you. But number one, I mean, I agree with you. I don't think necessarily that email is better. I just think that my email's a lot better. So I'm all right, Jack, right? I'm kidding. So the two really big points that you made, I really wanted to pick up on. One of them is something that I've been thinking about a lot recently and trying to articulate it, and you've just done it really well, which is, I think, one of the hallmarks of working well when dispersed is thinking about the impact of what you're doing on other people. And so for me, it's, and we talked about this in the context of a meeting. So rather than setting up a meeting to review the document and then have the meeting, having reviewed it. And God, I can't remember the number of times I've sat in a meeting where we're literally going through, a printout of a Word document that had been written a week ago that I could have, a waste of time for everybody involved. And people are still doing that in online meetings now. So if you can get to the next step and then have the meeting, that's always the best thing. And then I love this whole concept about, establishing rules. And funnily, last week, we had Dr. Brennan Jacoby on talking about the virtues of virtual. And the one that really stood out for me, and I think is really highlighted in what you're talking about here, is this concept of clarity. So being clear with everybody, with your customers, with your peers, with your family also, about the rules of engagement and when you're working and what kind of work you're doing. And these are all parts of the building blocks, I think. But again, to your point, and I think this is the sort of culmination of everything that you're saying, is this needs to be on the bloody agenda, right? We're beyond the point of the pandemic now where we're talking about how do we survive. We have survived for the most part. We're still here and we're still trying to figure it out. We may still have some concern about how we come out of this, but we should be looking forward. And I think this is the point that we put that on the agenda. Gary, I'm going to throw that over to you. How are you seeing this play out with the people that you're working with?
I absolutely echo everything that Laura said. So my company was I think very proactive in handling this. So I think the first thing it did was absolutely set the expectation that your health and your wellness is the most important thing. This is absolutely critical. So getting people to work from home isn't simply the office in a distributed way. We're in people's homes and we need to respect those. So the first thing, as Laura said, we need to recognise, this is different, and put new charters, updated contracts, the contract in terms of our relationship with work into place. Setting expectations at a personal and a company level. So this works both ways. So whilst organisations can set organisational bounds of what's acceptable and what the new normal needs to be coming down, it's really important that people take ownership of this at a personal level. So I have a colleague who says, look, I'm not available between 1 and 5 in the afternoon because that's the time I need with my daughter. She's not at school. I don't want to leave her alone. So between 1 and 5, he splits it with his wife, who does the morning. I'm not available. I'll be available from 6 until 8. I'm going to eat. I'll be available from 6 till 8, occasionally 9. That's the time, but don't book meetings between 1 and 5 because I'm not available. But he explains that. He gives context and he says, look, I'm with my daughter. So inside the company, you can see that. Does that affect his productivity? No. Does it affect his work-life balance? I would think that's a massive positive. So what needs to happen is organizations need to create the conditions by where employees are empowered to have those conversations. And what you're going to have, everybody isn't going to be in for the same hours, but so it needs to shift. I'll give you what's one of the simple changes I've done. In my calendar, if you are in my organization and you look at my availability, between 11 and 2, it says not available. Why am I not available? No, well, I'm going to take lunch during that time. But that's my time to stop me getting slammed up back to back with emails and with continual demands and Zoom and Slack. And, it's locked out time that I can release if I want, but you can't book. So if I want to do email, if I want to do a call, I can do that. But that's space. That's space for me to read, to write, and to get things done.
I like that, Gary.
Exactly.
And it also reminds me, Laura, of what you were just talking about, because these are kind of the same things that we should have been doing anyway, right? And look, I think there's a caveat with this, that I think you have to reach a certain position in your organization or a certain point in your career where you stop caring to be able to do that. Because I certainly think if you're beginning of your career, the thought of you not responding to someone or to carve out your time only to choose, when other people could book it, we have to change that, I think. But these are just good parts of, practice about being a good employee. It's just that they become more important to us now going forward.
And Dave, sorry, the fact of the matter is, based on research that we have done over 19 different businesses, 93% of people say their digital distractions impair their ability to do their jobs.
Yeah.
So any business with a titter of wit, which is maybe a Northern Irish phrase, needs to look at this, because you're not getting the best out of your people. Yeah. I believe that it's not that far off where when somebody's being interviewed for a job, their digital habits are going to be questioned. What's your email behavior throughout the day? Do you have one phone or two phones? Are you on Twitter? Are you on Facebook? Maybe the personal stuff's a bit tricky, but when it comes to their workplace, do you take screen-free breaks throughout the day? Because the fact of the matter is, people can't do their jobs, right? Yeah. Yeah. And this whole thing about productivity going down over the how many number of years, of course it has, because everybody's doing this. They're not actually able to spend that time doing the work that they were employed to do. Knowledge workers need to use their brains. They're not meant to be in reactionary mode all of the time. And the reality is, as I said, we've probably worked with 10,000 people now, over 300 businesses. Everybody pretty much is. You might get one or two men in their 50s at the back of the room going, oh, I'm absolutely fine. But generally, people are struggling. That is the reality. And businesses need to take this seriously. If you want to be ahead of the game, you've got to look at the digital habits of your people.
But I would build on that, Laura. And it's funny, as Gary and I have been having a very similar conversation about, in order to be a good employee, and I don't mean in a suck-up way, I mean in someone who gets noticed and, gets promoted and does well. It's a bit like in the old world. If I was going to a really important meeting, I'd be putting on my best suit, I'd be well prepared, I'd be, handling my sort of presence in the meeting. I think all of those things still apply, but it's just they're going to be acted out in a really different way. And so I think we're going to need, as a core skill, people to take control of their digital habits, to be accountable for how they're used, to present themselves well online in meetings, to be proactive about how they work with others. And I think there's a core part of leadership and development that needs to be to help people curate and develop those skills going forward, because they're going to be the people that we're going to want to hire, right? I want someone who can rock this stuff. I don't want someone who's clearly going to struggle with it.
Exactly. It beggars belief to me that this isn't on the agenda. When you think, humans and technology are the building blocks of every organization these days, and yet this isn't at the top of their training, their induction, their innovation, and I can't understand why.
Yeah,
to me, it's common sense.
I'm going to go further, and I know Gary's already probably gone there as well. But This is what we should be teaching our kids as well. Seriously, I had this whole rant before this started about how we ban, devices from classes. And I get, right, the distraction and blah, but our kids are going to emerge into a world where this technology could light up their capability in the world of work and the things that they're going to be able to do. So we should be helping them to build all of this resilience, to build all of these skills at the opportunity where we've got them in the door.
We need to realize that when children particularly are interacting with social media, they're not interacting with people. In many cases, they're interacting with PhD cognitive psychologists in algorithms. So we need to inform people about what's going on and put people back in control of technology. I love technology. What's the most powerful button on the phone? What's the most powerful feature? This. Oh, you go, there. Switch it off. The most powerful thing you can do with your phone is take control of it. You must be in control of the technology, and ultimately that means that you're able to disconnect from it, to do exactly what Laura said, which is to use your brain. Yeah. If you think of it, a phone is a fantastic creation and communication device, but you need to take control. Interestingly, one shift in what you've said, one phone or two into the shower. A recent change I've made in the last couple of years is I don't have a separate work phone. I now don't give my number out. So I have a personal phone and it stays downstairs at night. But I don't have a work phone because if I'm working, I'm typically at the laptop and you can get me on there. You can get me, if you call, there's a number you can call, it'll come through. If I want to divert to my personal phone, I can do. So use the tools, but don't default into a mode which is really going to be damaging for your health. Carrying two phones is and particularly a work phone that you leave on out of hours, that is toxic to your health. That is really going to hurt. And also, if you're answering those calls, you're setting the expectation that it's okay to call you. You need to take ownership of this and go, no, this is when I'm available, and I'll come back to you. And when I'm not available, I'm going to tell you I'm not available. So use out of office, use auto replies. Don't ghost people. Go back and say, I'm not available. I'll come back to you at this time and come back. But don't blur those boundaries, because
exactly.
Those devices are just going to eat into your life, and it's not a great place to go.
But I mean, I think this is the central part of your message, Laura. It's certainly the central part of my message with Rise of Humans, which is about taking accountability. Just in the interest of time, I just want to pivot slightly. And I want to talk about the other side of this. So there's a bit that clearly we miss from being in the office that the technology doesn't provide for. And I guess what I'd like to talk to you, Laura, about is how we position some of that. And let me give you just some brilliant examples. So this was a really fantastic article yesterday in The Guardian about the loneliness of working from home. And it speaks to a certain demographic of employee, but typically people who are need more social interaction. And it talks about, sort of how isolating, even though you're connected in this way, it can be. And then just let me show you this just because it's so good, and then I'll bring you guys in. But in the article was mentioned this, which is for those people who truly are missing the office. There is a website you can go to called thesoundofcolleagues.com. And if I just turn up the audio, you should hear it on the stream. So you can actually recreate your office environment and even adjust whether you want to hear the office dog more. Now, I love this so much that I then sat at my desk wanting to go and find my noise cancelling headphones so that I could then sit and not listen to it, because that's where we're at. But that's kind of the world we're at. So look, a bit facetious, but I think that the real question, Laura, is in order to help people connect better, what is it that they should do in advance or on top of their managing technology? Are there things that you're talking to people about to help them with that human connection, to sort of maintain that personal connection with people in the organizations that they're working in?
Yeah, the simplest thing that anybody can do is, if they're on like now, when I'm talking to you two, there's nothing distracting me. My phone is on flight mode in my bag. My email is on offline. People need to be present with each other. We all suffer from continuous partial attention, which means that a little part of our brains is on our devices if they're, alive and open and set to notify us, which means we can't give ourselves over 100% of the people that we're talking to on a sort of face-to-face level. And now that we're relying on digital to communicate, there's a bit of research. The conference call software that's used by 85% of Fortune 100 companies, they looked at what people do when they're on conference calls. 47% of people claim they're on the toilet during a conference call. I hope to God they're not on a toilet when they're doing my webinars. But anyway, let's be present with each other and get as much out of the exchange as possible, because that's where the intimacy comes in, rather than your head's all over the place. So for me, that's the most basic thing. And also, there is a lot of value in us being able to see each other and engage, but we are missing stuff through this. And I think there's an awful lot of value in picking up the phone and not being like a headshot on screen, and having the freedom to move around, and just using the voice as well is actually really beneficial.
That's really interesting, because that's, I mean, you won't know, but I bloody hate the telephone. But I do, there is a part of that where it's almost more personal in a sense than being able to see someone, because you've got that freedom to move around. I hadn't really thought about that. That's really interesting. Mm-hmm. So let's start to wrap this up. Let's think about, so we talked a bit about the key things that leaders can do. Is there, something that as individuals that we could be doing beyond, taking accountability for that? Is there something about how you manage that dialogue with your employer to make sure that you're in that right space?
I think if you have a realization that you maybe aren't working at your best because you are on all of the time and you've no headspace and you've no clarity of thought, etc., and you can't focus your mind, the reality is that if you feel that way, your boss probably feels the same way as well. So, having the courage to say, I feel quite digitally distracted sometimes. So I'd really like to experiment with maybe spending the first 20 minutes of an hour offline, so I can focus my mind and get on with my tasks. Are you open to me doing that? Because I reckon that I'm actually going to perform a lot better as a result. Now, any boss who says, no, you must not, needs to come and talk to me, because, let's get real here. Everybody feels the same. Pretty much most people have some level of overload and overwhelm, unless they've got really good digital habits. So I think just say you want to do a better job. And everybody wants to do a good job. That's the reality of it. People want to do their jobs well, No,
exactly. Look, I think that's a really great place for us to leave it. And I just want to sort of summarize some of the things that we talked about. I think, what I've heard really loud and clear from you, Laura, is about this has to be like not just on the agenda, but at the top of the bloody agenda. If you want to help your organization navigate through the road ahead, and do you see how I avoided saying into the new normal or even into the post-pandemic new normal? I deserve a prize for that. Thank you. Then we need to be talking about this. And I think you need to be curating a culture of transparency and openness that makes it possible for people to be able to do that, such that they can establish the right balance. And then the third thing was about empowering people to be able to make their choices, which kind of is the point of technology. So look, I think that's really a great place for us to leave it. Laura, what's the best way for people to reach out to you if they want to engage with you on this?
Well, I don't use email, so no, that's a joke. I do. They can email me at laura@shineoffline.com, the website shineoffline.com, and we're on LinkedIn as well. So yeah, email or website. There are a lot of blog posts on the website about focus and breaks and parenting in the digital age, and loads of content there if people want to check that out as well. So
that's great. Well, listen, Gary, Laura, thanks so much for joining us. It's been brilliant to have you on.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
It's always really stilted when you do that, isn't it? Do I say goodbye? I don't know. Goodbye. Maybe there's a wave. But anyway, look, here's me waving. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again on your Wednesday evening, for giving us your time. Hopefully that's been useful to you. Hopefully that's given you something to think about how you manage your own relationship with technology, and maybe with how you think about how you manage your relationship with technology for that of your team. I'm going to make that plug once again. Give us a like if you've enjoyed it. Give us your comments. Tell me, are you using your screens more or less as a result of lockdown? And we would love for you to subscribe if you can. That's us for this week. It's been great to have you here. We'll see you again next week. We'll have another great show for you then. Thanks for joining.
There are 1,000 stories in the Envisioners' future. This is just one of them.